Okay, well, I think that I will get started, and I want to welcome you all to the Roundtable. And I want to make a few quick suggestions. Hi, Annetta. So, and Carol and Shirley and Kathy and Susan and Don and Elisa and everybody. It's good to see you. So. I want to make a suggestion, and that is that in a few moments, I'd like us all to go to gallery view. And for those of you who are not showing your lovely, handsome faces, I want to encourage you to do so. Of course, you don't have to, but I'd like to encourage you to do so, because we're going to try to make this a bit interactive today, and it'll be really helpful to me if I can see everybody and each other. At least for a portion of it. And I also want to suggest that if you have a piece of, if you have some paper and pencil handy, that you make sure you have access to that, because I think it will be helpful to you as we work our way through this session. And I also want to alert you all to the fact that we're going to have a surprise guest speaker who will be joining us for about 16 minutes in just a few minutes. And I'll have some more to say about her in a moment. Today's topic is resilience. And I was tempted when I picked this topic to spend a lot of time kind of going into the psychology and the social psychology of resilience and the science behind the concept of resilience. And I thought, you know, that would probably be interesting to me and maybe one or two other people to go into the depth that I was planning on. So I decided to kind of reconfigure my presentation. And the other thing is I will admit that as I got into my research on the science of resilience, I discovered that I'm not as resilient as I thought I was. Okay? And so that sent me on a quest to, to try to find somebody who could give me some guidance without charging me an arm and a leg for how to become a more resilient person. And, you know, I think that we live in times now where resilience is really at a premium. And as I mentioned in my little blurb for this session, you know, we're coming off of 4 years of a divisive rogue presidency. There is increasingly blatant and open and naked white supremacy and the white supremacist challenge to our democracy in a variety of fashions, not the least of which was the January 6th attack on our Capitol. Oh yes, we have a little thing called the pandemic that is just spilling over into its third year. And while it is beginning to feel like that it's receding, that we don't have as much of a strength, it doesn't have as much of a stranglehold on us. One of the things that we've learned about this pandemic is that it's made us humble. And every time we've thought that we're looking at it through the rear view mirrors, it's figured out a way, the virus has figured out a way to rear its ugly head. There's that. Then there's, you know, a brutal war that is taking place now in Ukraine. And, you know, this list could go on and on, but I'll just mention one more. And this one is just a little bit closer to home. And that is that right now, there's a lot of uncertainty about the health and well-being and the future of our very own congregation, Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces. We're going through some changes now that we don't quite know how to, you know, what's going to happen or how to maneuver those. So, you know, this is a time that really calls for, you know, resilient people to exercise their resilience muscles. Now, I want to ask, this is part of the audience participation portion of the program. So everybody, if you'd like to, you know, unmute yourself. And like somebody to give me their definition of resilience. And if I don't have anybody raising their hand and volunteering, I will invoke my old professorial method of a cold call on somebody in the classroom. So who would like to? Okay, Charlie Welch has got his hand up.
You're muted, Charlie.
You're still muted, Charlie.
Charlie's talking, but nobody can hear me.
All right. My definition is.
We missed that, Charlie.
Something isn't working right. We've got too many mics open. Well, all right, one more time. Hanging in there.
Okay.
I thought
So
it meant flexible.
Okay, somebody else. Well, we got a technical problem on Charlie's end. Did I see?
Well, Charlie said hanging in, I think,
Yeah.
as resilience, if I understood his words. I would say ability to recover from a discontinuity or a shock.
Okay, the ability to recover from discontinuity or a shock. Kathy Cox, unmute yourself.
I was going to say something very similar to what Dave said, is a bouncing back after adversity.
Bouncing back after adversity. Okay, just a good take on it. Okay, Susan West.
I would say flexibility under difficult circumstances to move on and change.
All right, flexibility under difficult circumstances. And one second, Jack, and then I'll call on you. It's not working having everybody's mics on. So everybody mute yourself until you get called on. Sorry about that. Okay, Jack Welch, you're being called upon.
Well, I'm going to bring in Winston Churchill's definition of success, going from defeat after defeat and still maintaining your enthusiasm.
Okay. Optimism in the face of defeat. Okay. All right. Next thing what I'd like to do is to ask everybody to take a minute and jot down as many synonyms as you can think of for the word resiliency or resilient. And we've got a good primer there from the definition, but just jot down a few, and then we'll share some of those definitions, those synonyms. Okay, and what I'm going to do this time is I'm just going to go around my screen and call on each of you just to give me just one from your list. And if you have one from your list that's already been given, give another one or pass. So, and why don't we start with you, Elisa? Unmute yourself and.
Impressionability.
Impressionability. That's an interesting one. Okay. How about you, Don? Or Pat? Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
Elasticity.
Elasticity, impressionability, elasticity. Dave Rice, unmute yourself. And
Toughness.
toughness, I like that. Okay, Carol Winkler.
Flexible.
Flexibility. Susan West.
Ability to bounce back.
Ability to bounce back. Okay, Kathy Cox.
Strength.
Strength. Good. Annetta Turrentine.
Sorry, only German words came to mind, and I can't find the English
Give us-
translations.
Give us a German word.
Dickhüpfigkeit, Verbohrtheit.
Okay,
Those,
and
know.
now translate it for us.
Exactly. They don't come to mind.
Okay,
Shoot. You know, it's kind of the sticking with it, you know, kind of, yeah.
perseverance, stick to itedness.
It's much hard. It's much deeper than that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Shirley Davis,
What the?
you have to unmute yourself.
Recover.
Recover, okay. Jack,
Tenacious.
tenacity, tenacious. Good. Okay, and Janet Martin.
Hanging in despite odds.
Hanging in despite odds. Okay, so I think that we're getting a flavor for what kinds of traits are associated with the concept of resilience. And I'm just going to share the American Psychological Association's definition of resilience as a kind of a framework that I think encompasses a lot of the various concepts that you all have been articulating as synonyms for that word. And the American Psychological Association defines resilience as a process and an outcome, okay, of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences through mental, emotional, behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. Okay. And I'm just going to add just one little addition to that, that's sort of the Dave Steele edition, which I can't tell you who I stole the Dave Steele addition from, but I'm sure I stole it from somebody. But I'm gonna throw in there that one of the important qualities of being resilient is optimism tempered by reality testing. Okay, so now I want to introduce our guest speaker. This is our guest speaker today. Oh, and this means I have to share my screen, and there's all sorts of problems can occur that may test our resilience in doing that. But in just a moment, I'll share the screen with her. Dr. Lucy Hone is a New Zealand psychologist and author. She's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and a student of Martin Seligman. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Martin Seligman, but he is considered to be one of the founders of the positive psychology movement. And he's an interesting guy in and of himself. He was an expert on doing research on learned helplessness and depression. And it struck him that one of the characteristics of psychology as a discipline is that it focused so much on the negative, the abnormal, the problems that people were dealing with. And his career exemplified that. He was an expert on learned helplessness and depression. And so he decided to begin the scientific study of positive behaviors, positive affect, positive cognitions. and has developed a school of thought around research in that domain. And Dr. Lucy Hone was one of his students and is an expert on positive psychology. What we're going to be seeing today is a TED Talk that she gave in Christchurch, New Zealand. It's 16 minutes long, and she has become a TED Talk superstar. This particular talk she gave in August of 2019, and it has since garnered over 5 million views. And it's one of the, and during the pandemic, it's worldwide, it's been one of the most frequently uploaded and viewed TED Talks on the YouTube channel. So now I'm going to move into trying to share my screen and get this on, get her up. So just bear with me here. All windows. Sound. Oh, I should say that what I'd like you to do as you're watching this, and could somebody shout out, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now as you're listening to Dr. Hone's message, I'd like you to think about how her message about resilience in individuals might be applied to our community and our resilience as Unitarian Universalists in Las Cruces. And I'd also like you to think about what are the characteristics of a resilient community. We've talked about resilience in individuals and how are those transferable to communities. And then we'll give you a few minutes at the end of her presentation to mobilize your thoughts and to share them. But now we'll move on to her talk. Oops. Slide. Trying to figure out how to find my. Oh. It's covering my, just 1 second.
If you're on mute, if you're in a Windows program, just hit the Windows symbol and it'll give you what's up.
Which is the Windows symbol?
The one that looks like a paned window. It's got 4 little squares. It's down, it's a key. It's not on your screen.
Okay, this is going to test your patience, your persistence. There's no charge for this. Oh, there's my slideshow. Okay. Current slide. All right.
So I'd like to start, if I may, by asking you some questions. If you've ever lost someone you truly love, ever had your heart broken, ever struggled through an acrimonious divorce, or been the victim of infidelity, please stand up. If standing up isn't accessible to you, you can put your hand up. Please stay standing and keep your hand up there. If you've ever lived through a natural disaster, been bullied or been made redundant, stand on up. If you've ever had a miscarriage, if you've ever had an abortion or struggled through infertility, please stand up. Finally, if you or anyone you love has had to cope with mental illness, dementia, some form of physical impairment, or cope with suicide, please stand up. Look around you. Adversity doesn't discriminate. If you are alive, you are going to have to, or you've already had to, deal with some tough times. Thank you, everyone. Take a seat. I started studying resilience research a decade ago at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. It was an amazing time to be there because the professors who trained me had just picked up the contract to train all 1.1 million American soldiers to be as mentally fit as they always have been physically fit. As you can imagine, you don't get a much more skeptical, discerning audience than the American drill sergeants returning from Afghanistan. So for someone like me, whose main quest in life is trying to work out how we take the best of scientific findings out of academia and bring them to people in their everyday lives, it was a pretty inspiring place to be. I finished my studies in America, and I returned home here to Christchurch to start my doctoral research. I'd just begun that study when the Christchurch earthquakes hit. So I put my research on hold and I started working with my home community to help them through that terrible post-quake period. I work with all sorts of organizations, from government departments to building companies and all sorts of community groups, teaching them the ways of thinking and acting that we know boost resilience. I thought that was my calling, my moment to put all of that research to good use. But sadly, I was wrong. For my own true test came in 2014, on Queen's birthday weekend. We and two other families had decided to go down to Lake Ohau and bike the Alps to Ocean. At the last minute, my beautiful 12-year-old daughter, Abby, decided to hop in the car with her best friend, Ella, also 12, and Ella's mum, Sally, a dear, dear friend of mine. On the way down, as they travelled through Rakaia on Thompson's track, a car sped through a stop sign, crashing into them and killing all three of them instantly. In the blink of an eye, I find myself flung to the other side of the equation, waking up with a whole new identity. Instead of being the resilience expert, suddenly I'm the grieving mother, waking up not knowing who I am, trying to wrap my head around unthinkable news, my world smashed to smithereens. Suddenly, I'm the one on the end of all this expert advice. And I can tell you, I didn't like what I heard one little bit. In the days after Abby died, we were told we were now prime candidates for family estrangement, that we were likely to get divorced and we were at high risk of mental illness. Wow, I remember thinking, thanks for that. I thought my life was already pretty shit. Leaflets describe the 5 stages of grief: anger, bargaining, denial, depression, acceptance. Victim support arrived at our door and told us that we could expect to write off the next 5 years to grief. I know the leaflets and the resources meant well, but in all of that advice, they left us feeling like victims, totally overwhelmed by the journey ahead and powerless to exert any influence over our grieving whatsoever. I didn't need to be told how bad things were. Believe me, I already knew things were truly terrible. What I needed most was hope. I needed a journey through all that anguish, pain, and longing. Most of all, I wanted to be an active participant in my grief process. So I decided to turn my back on their advice and decided instead to conduct something of a self-experiment. I'd done the research, I had the tools. I wanted to know how useful they would be to me now in the face of such an enormous mountain to climb. Now, I have to confess at this point, I didn't really know that any of this was going to work. Parental bereavement is widely acknowledged as the hardest of losses to bear. But I can tell you now, 5 years on, what I already knew from the research, that you can rise up from adversity, that there are strategies that work, that it is utterly possible to make yourself think and act in certain ways that help you navigate tough times. There is a monumental body of research on how to do this stuff. Today, I'm just going to share with you 3 strategies. These are my go-to strategies that I relied upon and saved me in my darkest days. They're 3 strategies that underpin all of my work, and they're pretty readily available to us all. Anyone can learn them. You can learn them right here today. So number 1, resilient people get that shit happens. They know that suffering is part of life. This doesn't mean they actually welcome it in. They're not actually delusional. Just that when the tough times come, they seem to know that suffering is part of every human existence. And knowing this stops you from feeling discriminated against when the tough times come. Never once did I find myself thinking, why me? In fact, I remember thinking, why not me? Terrible things happen to you just like they do everybody else. That's your life now, time to sink or swim. The real tragedy is that not enough of us seem to know this any longer. We seem to live in an age where we're entitled to a perfect life, where shiny, happy photos on Instagram are the norm, when actually, as you all demonstrated at the start of my talk, the very opposite is true. Number 2, resilient people are really good at choosing carefully where they select their attention. They have a habit of realistically appraising situations and typically managing to focus on the things that they can change and somehow accept the things that they can't. This is a vital, learnable skill for resilience. As humans, we are really good at noticing threats and weaknesses. We are hardwired for that negative. We're really, really good at noticing them. Negative emotions stick to us like Velcro, whereas positive emotions and experiences seem to bounce off like Teflon. Being wired in this way is actually really good for us and served us well from an evolutionary perspective. So imagine for a moment I'm a cave woman and I'm coming out of my cave in the morning and there's a saber-toothed tiger on one side and a beautiful rainbow on the other. It kind of pays for my survival for me to notice this tiger. The problem is, we now live in an era where we are constantly bombarded by threats all day long. And our poor brains treat every single one of those threats as though they were a tiger. Our threat focus, our stress response is permanently dialed up. Resilient people don't diminish the negative, but they also have worked out a way of tuning into the good. One day, when doubts were threatening to overwhelm me, I distinctly remember thinking, no, you do not get to get swallowed up by this. You have to survive. You've got so much to live for. Choose life, not death. Don't lose what you have to what you have lost. In psychology, we call this benefit finding. In my brave new world, it involved trying to find things to be grateful for. at least our wee girl hadn't died of some terrible, long, drawn-out illness. She died suddenly, instantly, sparing us and her that pain. We had a huge amount of social support from family and friends to help us through. And most of all, we still had 2 beautiful boys to live for who needed us now and deserved to have as normal a life as we could possibly give them. Being able to switch the focus of your attention to also include the good has been shown by science to be a really powerful strategy. So in 2005, Marty Seligman and colleagues conducted an experiment, and they asked people, all they asked people to do was think of 3 good things that had happened to them each day. What they found over the 6 months course of this study was that those people showed higher levels of gratitude, higher levels of happiness, and less depression over the course of the 6-month study. When you're going through grief, you might need a reminder, or you might need permission to feel grateful. In our kitchen, we've got a bright pink neon poster that reminds us to accept the good. In the American Army, they framed it a little bit differently. They talked to the army about hunting the good stuff. Find the language that works for you, but whatever you do, make an intentional, deliberate, ongoing effort to tune into what's good in your world. Number 3, resilient people ask themselves, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? This is a question that's used a lot in good therapy. And boy, is it powerful. This was my go-to question in the days after the girls died. I would ask it again and again. Should I go to the trial and see the driver? Would that help me, or would it harm me? Well, that was a no-brainer for me. I chose to stay away. But Trevor, my husband, decided to meet with the driver at a later time. Late at night, I'd find myself sometimes poring over old photos of Abby, getting more and more upset. I'd ask myself, really? Is this helping you, or is it harming you? Put away the photos, go to bed for the night. Be kind to yourself. This question can be applied to so many different contexts. Is the way I'm thinking and acting helping or harming you in your bid to get that promotion, to pass that exam, to recover from a heart attack? So many different ways. I write a lot about resilience, and over the years, this one strategy has prompted more positive feedback than any other. I get scores of letters and emails and things from all over the place of people saying what a huge impact it's had on their lives. Whether it is forgiving family, ancient transgressions, arguments from Christmases past, or whether it is just trawling through social media, whether it is asking yourself whether you really need that extra glass of wine, asking yourself whether what you're doing, the way you're thinking, the way you're acting is helping or harming you, puts you back in the driver's seat. It gives you some control over your decision making. 3 strategies, pretty simple. They're readily available to us all, anytime, anywhere. They don't require rocket science. Resilience isn't some fixed trait. It's not elusive that some people have and some people don't. It actually requires very ordinary processes, just a willingness to give them a go. I think we all have moments in life where our life path splits and the journey we thought we were going down takes veers off to some terrible direction that we never anticipated and we certainly didn't want. It happened to me. It was awful beyond imagining. If you ever find yourselves in a situation where you think, there's no way I'm coming back from this, I urge you to lean into these strategies and think again. I won't pretend that thinking this way is easy, and it doesn't remove all the pain. But if I've learned anything over the last 5 years, it is that thinking this way really does help. More than anything, it has shown me that it is possible to live and grieve at the same time. And for that, I will be always grateful. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, damn.
Did you?
Are you still there, folks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, here we are. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I only had 3 consultations with Adam, who was actually very, very excellent, but he had a very marginal student he was consulting with, and I apologize for that. Okay, so again, what I'd like, well, first of all, I mean, again, I'd like us to think about applying the lessons that Dr. Hone shared from her life's experience with dealing with a horrendous tragedy to what we as a congregation can do to help restore our congregation to a resilient, hopeful place. We're betwixt and between right now. We've lost our minister. We are having some financial challenges and have been having them for a number of years. Our membership numbers are at best stagnant or have been sliding for a number of years. And so it puts us in a liminal situation. Again, we're betwixt and between, and that can be a difficult kind of situation for communities to deal with, especially if they're not resilient, if they're not able to, if they're not persistently optimistic about the future, if they are unable or unwilling to bounce back and maybe bounce back better than they were before. So what I'd like to ask you all to do now is take just a few minutes and jot down some ideas, any ideas that come to your mind about how we can apply the 3 strategies that Dr. Hone shared with us. And again, to remind you of those is that resilient people recognize that shit happens, they accept it, they don't have to like it, but they recognize it, and they don't wallow in the idea that this is only happening to me or this is only happening to our congregation. The second strategy is that their resilient people are good at identifying where the focus of their attention needs to be and where the focus of their action needs to be. And then finally, resilient people ask themselves the question of, is what I'm doing helping or harming me achieve the goals that I want to achieve? So again, take a few minutes, jot down some ideas, and then we'll open the floor to discussion. And don't be too nervous, I'm an easy grader. Okay, I'll give you just a couple of minutes to finish the idea that you're on, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Okay, who would like to start us off by sharing some of their thoughts about how we can translate the skills of resilient people into creating resilient UUCLC organization? So
I'll share a couple things.
okay, thanks.
I feel like that we or as the church need to not focus on the past problems. Let's say, as an example, with a minister, that what's happened has happened, and now we need to look forward. And the other thing I think is that in doing that, I think brainstorming ways that are very concrete in terms of brainstorming things that we as a church can do in order to move forward, whether it be financially or whether it be in terms of looking towards, how to get a new minister.
Great. Thank you very much, Susan. Who else would like to share with us? Shirley.
Our covenant says that we listen to each other, and this says that you look for good things. We can't always listen to the people talking about everything's bad. There's so many goods. We gotta be able to listen, think about the good. It's there.
Thank you. So, Dave Rice, I see your hand up.
Well, I guess the first point that was made was that shit happens, and the question is what does that mean for our congregation? Because we've had a couple things. COVID was the first piece of that happened, and in the sense of looking at that alone, the mere fact that we're here discussing this on Zoom is an indication of an outcome that I think is a good outcome, that we've now found a new way to gather. And so it isn't simply looking at the bad, but then of course the other part is the changes in the community itself. I say this as a newcomer, but clearly, this church has many people who've been in the congregation for, well, decades, and they've seen many changes. And so that requires an adjustment about what you expect from the congregation. And I think we need to talk about that. So those are a couple of thoughts.
Thanks, Dave. So Janet Martinique, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts during the talk. On strategy number 2, I think it would be good to spend some time researching how to have fun raising money. I mean, there's got to be ways that we can get together and do fun things. And on the third strategy is this helping or harming. I felt that when I saw the board report about trying to recover money from our minister. I mean, to me, that is harming us, because it's going to be more resentful for him, and it's going to hurt us and it's a negative thing. I don't know what the money is, how much it is, or how it happened, but it just doesn't seem a helpful thing to try to recover money from him.
Okay. Thank you, Janet. Okay. Annetta, you need to, okay, great.
You know, we have both people in our congregation that have been here for many decades and newcomers, but the people that have been here for a long time, they have seen ministers die, they have seen ministers that got sick, they have seen ministers been here for just a year or very short time. And so they have gone through traumatic experiences before and made it. So if we can, you know, if they can recall that and no big catastrophe happened, they didn't die of it, you know, we came out on the other side. And if we can remind them of it, it's kind of like, hey man, we made it. We gotta make this one as well, you know. So and the people that moved here from other places, I'm sure they have similar experiences they lived through, because no matter where you come from just another part of this country, or some, you have lived in some other countries, you are from a totally different culture, it's impossible that you just had great experiences, you know, no matter how old you are. Even as a little kid, you don't just have great experiences, you know. You know, ask a 5-year-old. Some of their friends have moved away and never heard from them again, you know. And so you always, you know, whether you're an employee somewhere that has lost co-workers or lost a job and find a new one, you know, maybe not a better one or maybe a better one. Your whole life is made up of cool shit, you know. Yeah, you just have to remind people that you have had some awesome experiences, and maybe we need to find a way to you know, if we're still doing Zoom meetings, have those kind of Zoom meetings where everybody tells each other cool stories that happen in their lives and build that up in resilience. And if they want to show up in person, then get those things going.
Okay.
And I think that would get the ball rolling.
Okay, thank you. Jack Welch, and then Kathy Cox, and then Carol. Oh.
There's a very popular term nowadays called "it is what it is." And this is mentioned by some of the other people before me, that we're in a situation where we just play it as it is. Don't lament over the past, play the game as it is today, and look forward to better things. In the meantime, we do not want to feel sorry for ourselves. We do not want to appear as victims. We're just clearly facing the reality, and we are, I'm going to use the word, even enjoy it. Be where you are and be in the moment.
Thank you. Thanks, Jack. So Kathy.
Okay, well, what Annetta said reminded me of what Patsy Tombaugh used to say, we'll muddle through somehow. And so I think that's what we're doing now. We're not giving up. We're muddling through, but we're already, our congregation is already showing resilience. As we persevere through these difficult times, we're still showing up. And in fact, some people are stepping up even more. And we're finding that we have people who are giving lay-led services that are just excellent, you know. So I'm thinking that what we've been doing is good. We've been focusing on community rather than worrying about finding a new minister. And so I think we're well on the path to being resilient.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kathy, for your observations. So, Carol.
I think we need to just enjoy and care for each other and kind of get reacquainted, learn to become that beloved community we keep talking about. And also, I think this didn't just happen to us. I think many congregations are suffering a loss of attendance, partly because of the pandemic. And then they get out of the habit of going to church and maybe enjoy Sundays, I don't know. But there are also a few people who just will not Zoom. So I guess we need to have both kinds of service for a while.
Thank you. DJ, I see your hand.
You're muted, VJ.
Yeah, well, Charlie was muted, not me. I think one of the positive things I think is whatever happened, it happened at the right time. Had we gone through the same process for another year, things would have been worse. So we are better off than we could have been or would have been. I think we need to have communications even with people who are hurting right now. They are hurting, they have reasons to be hurting, and they are not communicating with us. But I think on the whole, we need to be open to their thoughts also. The third thing that comes to my mind is that our leadership now, people who are really working hard to make a go of it, we need to support them as much as we can, volunteering or thinking of their health, and be with them or for them if and when they need us.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken like to? John.
Sure. Well, four things came to my mind as she was giving her three things about resilience. One was what we choose as a board to focus on our agendas. And we can apply those principles to what we talk about and consider as members of the board. The second thing I thought was what we choose to have as our service topics, because I'm on the services committee as well as the board. And so I think we ought to be mindful of those four things as we select topics and people. The other one was the choice of activities that we choose as a church. For example, the upcoming auction, which also serves the purpose of community building. I think we ought to do as many things as we can to build our community. And I think we'll slowly, after COVID's over, or loosens up anyway, begin to do things consciously, like getting together after our services, which aren't possible now, but will be possible. And I think those will help us. They're the kind of glue that holds us together. And I'm all for all those things.
Okay. Thank you, John. Yeah. Well, it's getting to that time when we finish up. I want to thank you all for coming today and for participating and for sharing your thoughts and your ideas. I think that there are several excellent ones. The ones that are the ideas that are sort of banging around inside my head right now are one, being forward thinking, not allowing ourselves to get mired in the past. There's nothing we can do about the past. We can mourn it, we can grieve that things happen the way they did, but it's time to be forward thinking. We need to be optimistic about and have gratitude for the things that are good about our congregation and our community and celebrate those. We need to be mindful about where our focus should be, and in terms of building towards the future. And I remember one of the first things that Eileen and I heard when we came to the congregation was the statement about, well, you know, we always muddled through. And I would hope, and this is not meant as a criticism for that saying, it's very helpful, that we were able to get to the point where we're not muddling through, that we are, you know, that we are really hitting our stride as a vibrant community. And the final thing I'll say is that I think that what we are demonstrating is that we are already resilient, and we need to build on that resilience as we move forward in writing the next chapter of the history of our congregation. So those are just some random thoughts that I had. And again, I want to thank you all for being here. Next week, we were scheduled to have Pamela Court, who is a new member of the Las Cruces School Board. She called me last night. There's been a death in her family. She's going to be out of town. So I'm not sure what we're going to be doing next week. But the week after that, we're going to be having a very interesting speaker who's an expert on policy issues as they relate to climate change and strategies for dealing with climate change. And that's a person that is well known to Dave Rice, and Dave recommended him. And so in 2 weeks, we will have that, and we'll see what happens next week. We'll muddle through.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for doing this, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
So have a good week, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.